All right, we're back. We're ready to start the second part of Satellite Showtime 84. The next hour will consist of a panel discussion with audience participation, we hope, if we can keep them awake out there. We have three notable guests with us today, all experts in their own field. It'll basically be a technical discussion. David Barker, who is with us today, has flown in from Hawaii for the occasion. Some of you people who are newer to the industry may not know David, but David has been around since the very first show in Oklahoma. I guess that makes you a pioneer, David, I'm not sure. David is responsible for a great deal of the technology that's out there today in receiver and down converter design, and chances are, if you've got a single down conversion receiver, there's a very good chance that it's a David Barker design. We also have with us today Mike Gustafson, who I'm sure most of you know and have seen here on the show before. Mike is a consultant and works for a company that operates uplink equipment, and of course is well known for his technical expertise. And Taylor Howard, of course, the Director of Research for Chaparral Communications, who is given many, many hours doing seminars and talks and discussions. And I just want to stifle pet peeves. Taylor has been that I've felt that the application of technology to receiver designs hasn't moved quickly enough. Any thoughts on that?
Well, some of us that are involved in small companies have tried to move technology a little more rapidly, and I find that when you're an individual or a consultant, it's very easy to do things and get immediate results. But this industry is absolutely amazing in the turnaround time for new technology. You realize that to develop a new automobile, which really isn't new, but is changes in body design, engine design, electronics, and so on, takes a minimum of 5 years. This industry isn't even that old, and we've seen at least 3 generations of receivers already. So my feeling is that sometimes it appears to be moving slowly on the surface, but actually there's a lot going on in these both small and large companies that are going to make the changes come out continuously from now on. But actually those changes, many of them were started as long ago as 2 and 3 years.
Do you see a definite trend, and I address this to all of you, are the receivers indeed getting better?
Well, certainly. The technology is being advanced now that it's sort of a catch-22. It's very slow to advance technology when you don't have the money to develop to R&D time. If you're spending all your time trying to produce a product just to keep the wolves from the door, you don't have time to press it very hard. But now a lot of the companies that have been around since the beginning have now developed enough wherewithal, both in engineering personnel and money, to actually start applying this. So the technology now is being looked at very hard by many small companies that will all together add up, and the receivers certainly are advancing. I'm seeing some tremendous improvements in receivers just in the last 6 to 8 months.
I'm sure that most of our viewers out there have used receivers or are even right now using receivers with what we call continuous video tuning.
Oh, wonderful.
When you talk about continuous video tuning, it's kind of a game. What channel am I on? And you have to identify the programming. You know, if you see kid shows, and it's a good chance it's Nickelodeon, and if you see a rock star on there, well, there's probably a 90% chance it's MTV. But nonetheless, it's a pain. Don't you think that receivers today should indicate precisely and exactly what channel they're on, David?
Well, you indicated something like precisely. And one of the big problems with the ones that indicate precisely but don't perform precisely is you may have a receiver that says precisely that you are digitally on transponder 2, and indeed you're watching transponder 3 because someone's switched the wires on the polarity control device, and you may be hopelessly confused if you're trying to listen to your favorite country music and you just plain can't find it on that transponder. I do agree that the technology is improving, but we have a very cost-driven marketplace, and people don't want to commit extra dollars into receivers if they can build them cheaper. So even though you have this receiver that may be indicating transponder 2 and you're really watching 3, you've really fooled the customer and say, you know, you're precisely on this channel. I have taken steps myself to correct that. It was out of frustration of trying to set up one of these, quote, precise receivers, unquote. And now I've developed for a company a synthesized receiver, which is of relatively low cost, but it does not compete with the $200 receivers. You're going to have to pay substantially more for that.
Well, I think the pricing of synthesized receivers, which is really what you're alluding to, is that you push the button and there's no question whatsoever that you're on that transponder. Started out, I believe the Maz Pro was probably the first to really have that technology in this marketplace over a year and a half ago, but the pricing was totally out of line. Nobody was really purchasing the product of any great quantities. And now we're seeing more and more synthesizers coming in and the price is dropping down now to where the receiver that David alludes to is now what I consider a very reasonable price synthesizer. And there's no doubt in my mind that very, very quickly the market will find itself being forced into nothing but synthesized receivers, just because once a person has had the ability to punch a button and know without a doubt that it is on transponder 17, they will no longer put up with the VTO tuned receivers, which are just nothing but breakpoint generators across the whole transponder. Although in deference to them, the ability to temperature compensate a VTO has been pushed beyond all expectations by the single conversion, down conversion boys who've done that. So certainly those are performing much better these days than before.
Well, wait, stop, hold on. You know, in the early days of aircraft radio, which weren't so long ago, we all referred to the knobs on the radios as a fishing license. And that's what most of these receivers are. They have a knob that is a fishing license to fish for the transponder. There is a problem with going synthesized. As one of the early manufacturers in synthesized receivers discussed or found out, they not only had a synthesized receiver, but they had crystal controlled audio. And the problem is the frequency of the audio isn't controlled that much, and the frequency of the transponder, the center frequency of the transponder, is critically dependent on the uplink being on frequency.
That's correct.
And if you go through and measure the downlink frequencies of many of these transponders, they don't control that very closely.
Yeah, I've found some personally that are up to 4 and 5 megs off.
Yes, I found them 5, so we agree. And that is potentially fatal for synthesized receivers. They need strong AFCs and they need the ability to do some video fine-tuning.
Is that a problem? I mean, it's not that difficult to fudge a synthesized receiver and put plus or minus 2 megs.
It depends on how you fudge it.
Actually, there is another technique besides frequency synthesis which I am going to actively pursue, and that's a technique known as frequency lock. In the frequency lock mode, you don't care exactly how the generated signal and the reference signal are exactly the same. Okay? And to synthesize, the two have to be exactly identical the same, or the circuit just won't tolerate it. You can change the frequency a little bit by taking the reference frequency and moving a little bit and get a little movement in the transponder frequency. But with the frequency lock situation, you can say, well, I will let this lock plus or minus 10 megs. As long as the counting circuit or the frequency counter, okay, says it's within that plus or minus 10 meg range, then it can do whatever it wants and the AFC of the receiver can take over.
Isn't there a problem with interfering signals or adjacent signals with that type of system?
One of the distinct advantages of the synthesized receiver without the AFC obviously is in the terrestrial interference case. There would never be any question of the terrestrial signal being the stronger signal and grabbing the AFC and making the IS filters useless because there is no AFC. So yes, if one would go to the frequency lock situation, which would accommodate wide deviations and uplink frequency variations, then one would solve one problem but generate another.
Create another problem. Yeah.
Well, but I'm not so sure that it's as big a problem as we might be giving the impression here, because the commercial receivers have been synthesized since almost day one. The Comtex, Scientific Atlanta's, Standard, all those have been frequency synthesized with AFC, or in some cases no AFC, and those have been performing well. It is true there are a lot of the transponders are not in the center of their where they're supposed to be. They're not there, but these receivers tend to be able to have the bandwidth to handle it. And the receivers, the newer synthesized receivers of our technology, of the one like the one that David designed, except in 1 or 2 cases, which, if you want to watch those transponders, there was just a little bit of jitter due to it. They seem to perform well. So I think the addition of a very small amount of AFC with the synthesis is really the way that will ultimately go for them.
David, you're primarily responsible for developing 3 years ago the image reject single conversion down converter. In all fairness, there were 2 types of single conversion down converters introduced back at the San Jose show. Yours has by far and away become the most popular. You've now developed a synthesized single conversion, which is another breakthrough, and I know Mike has had some time to play with it and has spoken quite favorably of it. Do you foresee a strong trend in the industry towards synthesized receivers of one sort or another? They may be AFC, they may not be AFC.
Very definitely. And like I was saying, this is a cost-driven marketplace. And as soon as there are some competition, you know, substantial competition in the synthesized receiver marketplace, then the manufacturers that are currently involved are going to have to reduce their costs, you know, to be competitive. So yes, I do see it as a major trend, especially when the customers become more sophisticated. And that's really the job of the various publications like your STV magazine or possibly Orbit, to let the customers know that there is a better way to do it.
There's something you have to realize here, though. Most of us, David included, David didn't just recently look at synthesis. I think all of us that have been involved in receivers have been looking at that for some time. And the key to this, in most cases, is a divider chip that has been a gleam in everybody's eye for 10 years probably. How to make it. And there are now 2 available, one that really works in the frequency range that we need. A year ago, that part was $50. We see receivers, the 70 megahertz portion of receivers, for just about $50 now, so it doesn't make economic sense to put one $50 part in. That part is now in the $20 class in large quantities. And they're able to manufacture them in large quantities. The yield on them is pretty good. So it's a case of the industry getting large enough and the demand growing rapidly or large enough that the price of the individual components comes down. So you'll find out receivers like this will come out in the beginning. They'll be fairly expensive. There'll be some competition. There'll be more and more receivers, and the costs will go down. Because a $20 component that a company buys and puts in a receiver probably maps out to something around $50 or $60 when it appears as a consumer item.
We need economy of scale to do it, in other words.
Exactly.
Okay, we've got to go away for a small break, and we'll be right back.
National Satellite Communications, NSC, a leading national distributor of TVRO equipment in the satellite receive industry, now has 2 ultra-modern office warehouse facilities serving its dealer network. Corporate headquarters located in the 21st Century Park, Clifton Park, New York, and on Satellite Boulevard, Orlando, Florida. In addition to competitive product pricing, NSC offers the marketing tools necessary for its dealers to compete in the marketplace, such as an attractive 4-color dealer retail sales and order catalog containing top brand name products such as Geneel, Drake, and STS, just to mention a few. National Satellite Communications advertises nationally in both trade and consumer-type publications and provides qualified sales leads to its dealer network. NSC has fully equipped factory-authorized service centers in both its New York and Florida locations, offering technical advice and assistance when needed, and so much more. For more information, call 800-833-4485 or 518-383-2211 and find out why at National Satellite Communications, now more than ever, you can count on us.
Okay, we're back with David Barker, Mike Gustafson, and Taylor Howard, and we're discussing receiver technology and design. Synthesized receivers, as demand comes and the technology is available, and the economies of scale apply, we're going to see them. I was speaking with Bob Lulai out in Las Vegas in March, I believe it was, and Bob and I were discussing the down-converter design. And I'll start with you, David, since that's your primary interest. And Bob suggested that perhaps we were wasting a lot of time and money building very high-performance LNAs, lots of gain, low noise, fairly expensive devices, and that he felt that the quality and performance of down converters has been slipping, and that perhaps by improving the down converters, we could get away with cheaper LNAs and still maintain the same performance.
Well, that's true. 30 dB or 35 dB gain LNAs would be more than adequate if the down converters performed in the manner to which they are capable. I have noticed, even in the company that I'm associated with, that the down converter performance is continually degrading over what it was originally when I came up with the design. The down converter that I originally did was measured out at a noise figure of slightly over 6 dB, which is extremely good for this band. And lots of people say that that's an unrealistic number because of the losses incurred in the image reject mixer, but it was really achievable. There are people now building receivers with noise figures of the down converter probably in the 20 dB range, at least 20 dB at the worst spot in the band. Some of the down converters are not even consistent across the band. At one point in the band, they may be 15. At another point in the band, they may degrade on down to 20 or even worse. With a very poor down converter, the only way to overcome it is with the 50 dB LNAs. Now, when this market, the home market, started up, the only thing that was really out of the reach of the garage shop builders was building LNAs. I mean, the test equipment and the gallium arsenide parts that went into it were just not available and cost prohibitive, you know, both things. So that the marketplace started up using the commercially available LNAs. They were expensive, but there really wasn't any way to build quality LNAs that are going to last in the field in your garage initially. So the receivers were built at home, and they bought the commercial LNAs. And the commercial LNA spec was 50 dB. And early attempts to build 30 dB LNAs failed for one reason or another. I'm not sure of the reasons. And since those 50 dB LNAs were there, the receiver manufacturers took the easy and cheap method and built the down converter to accommodate them.
Well, I think you might be giving the designers of down converters too much credit, possibly including you, that they didn't know what the noise figure of their down converter was, and they didn't know how to measure it. They didn't know anybody who could measure it. So whatever it was, it was. And they found that, well, it worked just fine when they used XYZ company's LNA, but when they used one of the others that was running 40 dB, it didn't work so well, so they just specified to use that other LNA. The original commercial LNAs had 50 dB gain, and if you want to talk original, we have to say when was original. In 74, 75, 50 dB was not standard, it was 30 dB. But the extra 20 was thrown onto most LNAs as time went on, because in those days, the commercial receivers had their down converter in with the demodulator. So you had a run of 100 feet of Heliax or 50 feet of RG214, and you had to throw away a quarter dB per foot in order to get the signal from the antenna back into where the rack of equipment was installed. So when they moved the down converter out to the antenna, it was possible at that point to put in cheaper LNAs, but as David pointed out at that point, everyone had standardized on 50. And now what's happening is you're seeing people coming along with the non-isolated 30 dB gain LNAs, which are very inexpensive and very good noise figures, and they will work on some receiver designs and not on others. And really what's required is for someone to, or some organization or company, maybe space, somebody to say, well, we're going to set up a methodology for testing and qualifying this equipment and be able to do a little bit better matching and find out which LNAs, and it's true, we could cheapen the price, lower the price of the whole project quite a bit by matching a down converter to an LNA, i.e. noise figure, to the gain of the LNA. And the whole concept you're trying to get across here is that as long as the gain of the LNA is high enough to swamp the noise figure of the down converter, then the noise figure of the LNA is dominant. And you need at least 20 dB greater than the noise figure. So obviously if you have a 6 dB noise figure down converter, that's 26, let's call it 30 for a little extra losses into it. But if you have a 15 or 20 dB down converter, you're up to 45 to 50 dB at that point. So.
The history is correct. As a matter of fact, almost all the standard receivers of not many years ago, and still the standard ones that are sold in the commercial applications, have a 15,000 degree front end. which is a fairly high noise figure. Well, the reason for 50 dB gain LNA is that the effect of that down converter, or that first mixer, is divided by the gain of the LNA. So a 50 dB gain LNA has a gain of 100,000, and that divides that 15,000 by 100,000. So you see a very small contribution of the down converter by using that large gain LNA. You could get by with 40,000, and then the contribution would only be 1.5 degrees Kelvin. But in most broadcast applications, the engineers are very conservative, and they want not only a small contribution, but they want a margin of 10 below that so that they know they're safe. Well, that's not an economical thing to do. What's really happening is that we're seeing the mix and match that's so popular now with LNAs, feeds, down converters, and we know most experienced dealers learn, all of the distributors that I know of now understand, and their dealers are learning what they can mix and what they can match. There are some 30 dB and 40 dB LNAs that simply won't mix with certain receivers that your customers will want. So you can only go to 50 and 55 dB gain. What's happening, and when we look back on this in a few years, is that we're finally doing the systems job, as the military people call it, and the design is coming so that the LNA and down converter are built together in many cases. And when you do that, you optimize exactly what Mike and Dave are talking about. You put the minimum amount of gain with enough margin inside the box, put the down converter in the same box, and then you have it optimized both for performance and cost.
Isn't that what we call an LNC?
Yeah, I was going to say
It's
that.
an LNC, an LNB.
Oh, well, here's a good point. You know, it's a super idea. You've outlined why it's a good idea. It hasn't caught on.
Its time hasn't come yet. And its time hasn't come because it's a very volatile market price-wise, and people like to mix and match. The dealers simply don't want to be tied to one thing they have to use and not be able to swap out one component. They still want components to swap.
But it goes back, I think, to the use of the VTO as the local oscillator in an LNC, and that is that when Dexel ships a product, they match that LNC to a receiver, so that if a dealer goes out and he has a service call and he has to try to troubleshoot it, the first thing he has to concern himself with is especially if it was an older product where it's sat there for a year and they've changed the tuning curve of the VTO, they can't match that new receiver to the new LNC he's going to install there. But it's absolutely true that the people don't want to be tied down. I personally, in my use, would never use an LNC. Not that it's not a perfectly good technology, but I change receivers like I change my underwear. It's constantly going in and out. So I needed to be able to change that. And but I always felt, judging by the contacts that I have, that people were initially afraid of the cost. They'd say, well, I can buy a XYZ receiver and it cost me $1,200. But I could go buy this receiver and it only cost me $700. What they weren't figuring out is they had to pay $350 to $400 for the LNA, and the LNC was part of the package. There was a lack of education there. So it was
That's
necessary.
a very good point. As a matter of fact, when you were talking about MassPro earlier on about the price, and the same applies to Dexel, of course, that is exactly what happens. And in actual fact, when you look at MassPro and Dexel as two LNC receivers, the price is not all that exorbitant compared to other receivers, because it does indeed have all the bits and pieces, the LNA and so on.
It has all the pieces, but I have never seen them priced cheaper. They've always been slightly at a premium, and they should be cheaper because there is interconnects that do no longer have to be generated to go between the boxes. Since those interconnects, which are expensive because you have to be weatherproof, at least the LNA part of it, you know, because it's going outside. So if those interconnects, which are expensive, are deleted, the combination should be cheaper, and they are never priced cheaper. They're always at a slight premium.
That's changing. I think when you get back to Hawaii and whenever the mail finally arrives, you might be getting a lot of ads, and you'll see that in fact is just this week and last week being changed. That those manufacturers are realizing that they've got to make those high-end. They were trying to apply those products to the high end and say, well, this is the super gee whiz product of the technology, and now they're realizing, well, that high-end field really isn't there. There isn't a lot of people willing to pay for the high-end, so they're starting to down price it in order to be more competitive. So I would expect the pricing to be identical, if not cheaper, very quickly. Because David's absolutely right; they have been a little greedy in their pricing.
Well, I think the audience has to realize that when David said that, I had complete sympathy with him, and it's engineers talking. I had a marketing fellow explain something to me the other day that just made no sense from engineering terms at all. And he explained why a price on a certain thing was high, some other product. And I tried to explain to him why it should be cheaper, and he says, well, he says, I'll tell you what Ring Lardner said. I said, what's that? And he says, shut up, he explained. So there's something that those of us who are engineers don't know about pricing, I think.
Marketing.
Yeah. Obviously, to my understanding, a good engineer should be aware of marketing and the effects of marketing and the importance of marketing. And I think sometimes engineers tend to put themselves in an ivory tower. Perhaps they're not as effective as they could be if they understood the needs of the market. Well,
sometimes it's important to stay in that ivory tower a little bit so that you maintain a little aloofness from it.
Well, that's why you're in Northern California, David's in Hawaii. I haven't figured out why Mike's in San Jose yet.
Silicon Valley.
Taylor, you have talked very slightly and dropped a few hints about perhaps some breakthroughs in receiver design that perhaps in the video processing, the demodulation techniques. Are we going to see something? Are we nearing that breakthrough?
Well, I think we're going to see a number of things. There have been receivers announced lately that have lower thresholds by various means. Quite a number of things coming along in the open market now in terms of threshold extension. I don't think the threshold extension as such is really the important thing. What the industry is faced with, of course, is proliferation of birds, narrow spacing, interference. And the drive is toward getting lower carrier to noise ratio or better carrier to noise ratio performance in receivers. But it's really toward increasing the capture ratio of the receiver. If you're experienced in looking at Galaxy and Satcom in various installations and small antennas, sometimes with some receivers you find interference. You put in another receiver, you won't have it. These have something to do with the detail, particularly the IF bandwidth of the receiver, and many times the type of detector that's in the receiver. I think any of us that are in the business are beginning to home in on which detectors perform better, which IF bandwidths perform better, how to use this. And there's a lot going on there in the background now to improve capture ratios and to get rid of the interference without interfering with the video quality. And that is clearly the future. I mean, there's no way we're going to move into 2-degree spacing without some technical changes. Technical changes in the orientation of the spacecraft axes, technical changes in the receivers to upgrade them. And these receivers, once we learn to build them, will be very resistant of terrestrial interference as we know it. So back to our speaker earlier this morning talking about TI and filtering, there are things you can do actively in a receiver to help that too.
Okay, we've got a break here for a message from one of our sponsors, and we'll be right back with a little more talk, and hopefully we can get our audience participating and allow them to ask some questions. See you in a minute.
Are you confused about satellite programming guides? Are you tired of monthly inaccurate guides that are big and bulky and about as much fun to use as a city phone book? How about tabloids with hard-to-read print, incomplete movie listings that are about as easy to use as a road map? Or newspaper guides with confusing grids that fall apart in your hands? There is an alternative. Onset, the easy-to-read, easy-to-use weekly programming guide with more movies and sports. Best of all, Onset is only $39. That's right, 52 issues for only $39. But don't take our word for it. We'll send you a free copy of Onset, and you can judge for yourself. And if you're a dealer, ask about our dealer program. Make your customers happy and make money. Call Onset now. Toll free 1-800-438-2020 or write Onset, Box 2347, Shelby, North Carolina, 28150. Onset, you've seen the rest. Now try the best.
Okay, we're back again with our panel. We have David Barker, Mike Gustafson, Taylor Howard. and we're discussing all kinds of things. I'd like to get the audience a little bit involved now. I know there's quite a few dealers sitting in the audience, and we'd really like to hear from you. What kind of problems are you facing, either in choosing equipment to buy, installing the systems? What kind of feedback are you getting from your customers? What does concern you? And we can talk on a very general terms here. It doesn't have to be specifically anything we've discussed right now. If you've got something that bothers you that perhaps we can help, I'd like you to address the problem. We have a microphone set up so you can come up and ask the questions. And I'd like you to identify yourself, tell us your name and where you're from and what your background is, and go on national TV. Yes, sir.
Yeah, Chris, my name's John O'Neill. I'm from Nile Communications here in Wisconsin. And I had a question sort of for you as to a lot of the dealers that I run into everybody's pretty much small time where I'm at. And they have a big problem with their distributors. I know there was a distributor organization that was supposed to have been started to form down in Orlando last November. And I was wondering if there's any way that a magazine like yours or somebody could do an unbiased report on how a distributor is servicing their dealers and what kind of support they're giving them.
I think I've been set up, Taylor.
Well, let me answer that. I've been in the last 2 weeks to 3 shows or gatherings that distributors have put on. One in the East, one in the Midwest, and one in the West. And the distributors are becoming more and more aware of the exact problem you're talking about. That there are installation problems, there are supply problems, a whole range of things, and that the education can't come at this level out of occasional TV shows. It really needs to be a day-to-day thing done by individual distributors. And I was very pleased. The one distributor had been doing it for a long time, and it was obvious from the questions his dealers were asking that his educational program was really working. He's been doing it for over a year. Typically when he invites dealers in, he'll get more than 300 to one of his soirees, and he doesn't give away food or whiskey, he just gives away information. And it works very well. And I think we're going to find more and more distributors doing that. I think it's absolutely necessary because the number of dealers is growing so rapidly that you simply can't do it with just a magazine or just a trade association. You need that hands-on, one-on-one level. The most successful one I saw last week, they actually started the first day, it was a 2-day seminar this time, they actually started the first day by assembling a dish in the parking lot. And they had to shut off registration at 350 because you can't have 350 people standing around an 8-foot dish watching it go together. So they're going to do it again very quickly. I think we'll see a lot of that.
I think you've hit, I think you've projected what is happening and told us what is happening right now. The question is still, how does a dealer determine who's a good distributor and who's not? And he's suggesting that perhaps some magazine should be covering, or a trade association.
Well, I think the dealers can force the issue, though, by asking a distributor, when they decide they're going to go into this business, to look at and say, well, do you offer a training program? If the answer is yes, in all likelihood, that distributor has given the thought to realize that, wait, in order for me to have happy dealers and have a product that stays out there and doesn't keep bouncing back to me with rubber bands, I have to educate them. If they've taken that step, they have probably taken the other steps to offer good products and to develop a very good relationship with their dealers, and not a fly-by-night or just a mail-order house. So if I were getting into the business at this point, I would just use one of my prime criteria is that distributor offering an education or training program? If he's not, hang up the phone and call the next guy until you find the one that does. And what that'll do, that'll force the distributors who are not willing to make that step, it'll force them to go out back to selling cars or hot tubs, and it'll allow those who really want to stay in the business to say, well, okay, in order for me to be competitive, I'm going to have to offer this, and they'll start doing it. When you try to ask someone to take a club and beat it over someone's head, it usually doesn't work, and all you end up doing is making a lot of enemies. Sure, you can sometimes save some dealers a little heartache by they'll say, oh, I better not deal with that guy, but that really doesn't work too well.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I think that the gentleman has hit upon a very key problem here, and many of the comments I hear from dealers are exactly that. On the other hand, in all fairness, many of the problems I hear from consumers are asking about, how do I find a good dealer? The dealer saying, how do I find a good distributor? And the distributor saying, I need a good supplier.
Well, it's going back up the line. You know, we're finding now that For instance, all of our distributors now have repair equipment, which we've supplied to them, so they can repair Polaroiders and the like. And the answer is that there's so much of the equipment out in the field now that distributors simply have to do, if not servicing on equipment, at least screening before it goes back to the manufacturer. Many times it's hard to find out what's wrong in the system. It's impossible for the dealer or consumer to spot what's wrong. And all you have to do is get it on the distributor's bench, and you can find the wrong component and send it back instead of shotgunning it and sending everything back. And as a manufacturer, I've been very pleased to see new distributors coming along, realizing that up front they're going to have to do not only an educational program, but servicing and other work.
After-sales support.
After-sales support of the dealers.
I think to point out one specific that I'm personally aware of besides Chaparral is Luxor Electronics has now instituted a program, I understand, that they will not allow any distributor to handle their product who is not had invested in a certain prescribed level of test equipment and gone through the education to be able to repair those products. And on their side of the coin, there's always been a reluctance of manufacturers to give too much information because they're afraid they're going to get the product stolen. And I'm seeing now that the dealer or the manufacturers are saying, well, we can't do that anymore, and they're giving out complete manuals, including schematics and repair
Isn't it
facilities.
nice to see schematics?
Oh, finally,
and so I think that's a trend that's going to be dominant in the market if they're going to continue with this.
Okay, we have another question. Hello.
Yes, I'm Harley Vodak from Vodak TV over here in Baraboo, Wisconsin, and I've been in the TV business for over 25 years, and in the rather newcomer to the satellite business, but we've been working with them for about 2 years and very actively selling them for about 1 year now. But a question that we hear quite a bit from our customers is, okay, what's happening? When might we have to start paying for this programming? I realize DBS is coming along, and I think that's another different area, but as we see more and more commercials on the satellite stations, you think, well, maybe this is the answer, maybe this is what's going to come to, but do we foresee something that would be a subscription type of system for satellite home viewing?
I think I'm probably going to make a few people mad out there answering your question. I think there's absolutely no doubt that premium programming will be scrambled in the future on the satellite.
I think as a group we ought to support that issue.
Yes.
I agree.
Because
absolutely.
right now the legitimate marketplace for this TVRO business is for people who do not have any usable TV. And for those people, at this point in time, they have many advertiser-supported things to watch, religious things to watch, and some of the religious ones are not completely religious. They run good movies and old shows, the same kind of old shows that you would get on a, an independent station. And then you have country music and other things. So there is entertainment available to people without the premium programming. But the scrambling option, once it is invoked, makes it a legitimate marketplace for all services, not just the ones that are not scrambled and advertiser supported.
There's no such thing as free lunch.
Well,
but it's not only that, though. Our problem right now is that there's only so much video available, and the quality of that is not all that high. And the movie industry is starving to death, in spite of what you see in some places. But the unemployment in the Actors Guild is very, very high. And the average salaries are quite low. All we see are 3 standard deviations out, the very high-paid ones. But the only way we're going to get the video improved is if we get back to the concept of the box office.
Right.
And that is that when you see something, you pay for it.
Count the
and
gate.
Getting the money flowing back in to this industry to get the video improved. It's sinking otherwise, and we may have this immensely capable technical system that won't have anything to show on it, which would be really, really bad.
Essentially, we've been on a free ride, and it cannot continue. Programmers like HBO, Cinemax, they have to make revenue somehow, and they're going to have to address the scrambling issue. There's no point in them scrambling it and not making it available to you. When they're addressing this problem, I can tell you that what they're thinking of is down the road that they're going to have addressable systems, descrambling systems, multi-tier, where they can turn you as an individual on and off. If you don't pay your subscription, they can turn you off. If you pay it, they turn you back on. The format or the scenario I personally envision is that to get away from the incredible confusion that will be caused by 8 different programmers using 8 different descrambling systems, that indeed the programmers are going to have to get together and work together on some kind of standardization, and perhaps they could group together and offer a block of 5 programs. You might want to match up sports, a movie, some educational, and a block of 5. And perhaps there'll even be brokers out there who are kind of the middlemen for the programmers who will offer blocks of programming. It could be the scenario where HBO, for instance, is up on 2 or 3 different satellites in 2 or different 3 scrambling modes to enable it to fit into these, as Dave Beeching from Oak said, these programming condominium.
But I think it's going to have to go, the TVO market is going to have to grow tremendously before that can ever happen, because keep in mind that the reason that those signals are on the satellite are for the cable TV operators, and they are not going to go along with this game whatsoever. And so I see what's happening is that essentially, if you look at all the movie services, they're all repeats of each other. HBO may have a blockbuster today, but in 1 week, minimum or maximum 1 week, you're going to have the lowest movie company is going to also, or other service going to have that as well. So what I think is going to happen is that you will select one single channel that you're going to buy for your premium service, and you'll buy that decoder to get the movies. All the rest will either be advertiser supported or subscription supported. That is to say, the religious ones where you send in your money just to support that programming.
Well, I disagree with something there. It's no longer the case that they're on the satellite just for the cable system. I know from some discussions we're having within space and with these suppliers that a few years ago when we had 30,000, there was no interest. Now that we can demonstrate there are over 400,000 systems in and growing at a great rate, probably in the 40 to 50,000 per month range, the suppliers are interested. They're talking to us now like we're real businessmen. They want this market, and they know that we're the precursor of DBS. This may be the DBS, but they know it's here now, and they want that market. They want that nickel from every one of us. The problem that is there, of course, is the descrambler technology hasn't caught up yet to get that done. But they want our market, and they're not going to be up there just for cable systems. They're going to be up there for us.
One mistake that whoever finally does it, I hope they don't make, is to go into this, we have a captive audience, we're going to charge all we can get. I think that that has killed more over-the-air subscription TV services than anything else. I mean, when some part of a city knows that they can get HBO for $8 a month on cable, but to get the equivalent type program from some over-the-air service, they got to pay $39 or $49 a month to watch the same movies, you know, they're going to object, and they're going to say, well, we're not going to pay for that. We'll wait for a cable to get here, or we'll wait for that. I mean, I realize that you're going to have, that the manufacturers of the decoders are going to have to charge for the decoders. But after that, the monthly fee should be set at some reasonable level that would provide the same amount of income to the program suppliers as they would have got on cable. You know, they can...
Well, we've been trying to negotiate what's known as a wholesale rate, if you will.
Yeah.
A cable subscriber rate instead of an individual high rate. And that's going to happen. But, you know, I think that somebody is going to do it. I don't think it's going to be as soon. It keeps slipping back. You know, it was going to be the middle of 1982 when everything on the bird was scrambled, and it's now going to be the middle of 85, and one of the premium services may scramble. My guess is that there's some manufacturing problems in the way that'll slow that down. I'm not talking about anything that I know privately. It's just as a manufacturer, I know what it takes to get a lot of stuff in the field, and our market is big now, and it's hard to turn out 100,000 of anything that works. It works the same as the first one.
Prototype.
So that's going to happen, but it's going to happen later than we think. And my guess is that the first one out is going to make the mistake. I don't know what the mistake is, but it isn't going to work right. It's going to be like the 8-track cassette or the disc player. It's going to be there. It'll go away. 3 to 5 years, 10 years, we'll certainly settle down on some encryption standard, and it'll be inexpensive. It'll be a $25 job.
Okay, we have to break away for a short message, and we'll be right back.
Calltronics Incorporated of Richland Center, Wisconsin, manufacturer of TVRO systems, has become synonymous with quality thanks to their line of stainless steel antennas. The Nova SS112 has been independently tested and approved for 2-degree spacing, smooth, accurate, durable. The family also includes the SS90 and the amazing 5-foot antenna, the SS66, all with 10-year warranties. Calltronics appreciates its dealer network. Support literature from Calltronics includes a full-color catalog listing receivers, LNAs, actuators, feed assemblies, and all accessories, plus much more. For information and pricing on our stainless steel antenna systems, call toll-free 800-826-5285. That's 800-826-5285. Our regional office warehouses are in Boulder, Colorado, and Las Vegas, Nevada. See Calltronics Systems and Personnel at the Communications Electronics Show in Chicago, booth 4121, and at the Can-Am Show in Niagara Falls, booths 411 and 412.
At Chaparral, we won't let one industry breakthrough stop us. In fact, in just 4 years, we've made 6. And that's only the beginning. Chaparral, our focus is on the future.
Okay, we're back for the last segment of Satellite Showtime 84. I'm here with David Barker, Mike Gustafson, and Taylor Howard. And we're fielding some questions from the audience about just about anything you can think of. Go ahead, please.
Thank you, Chris. Jim Murphy from KTI North. I've been in the industry about 4 years, and now we're seeing an influx of some Japanese imports. I'd like to address everybody here and ask them what they feel in as far as quality and what that's going to do as far as the cost effectiveness.
We're going to have to tie Mike down in the chair for this question.
Okay.
He's ready to go on Japanese. Go ahead, Mike. You can have that one to start with.
I see. Okay. I think that it's probably in a great extent a false idol or devil, depending on how you look at it. The so-called Japanese invasion has been with us from almost the very beginning, although they never felt that the market would grow to this extent, and now they're becoming more visible. If you were to really tie down quite a few of the manufacturing companies that you tend to associate with American-made, you'd find out that their PC cards or some portion of it's being assembled in Mexico or Japan or Taiwan or Korea. But I feel that that is not necessarily a negative. It's unfortunate for a lot of the backyard operations that got started who will now get stomped by the boats coming from offshore. But the quality, I think the quality is there. A lot of the very, very big companies in Japan that are known for quality are getting involved in the market, and they aren't going to tarnish their image in any way. And in fact, that's why they've held off so long, to make sure this really was a market that they could do right. But some recent tours that I've taken in Europe indicate that we really should also ask that question of European onslaught, that I feel that those companies in Europe probably have as much to threaten as the Japanese so-called invasion. So I feel that the market's going to benefit from it just from the standpoint of better quality and lower pricing information.
Okay, one of the problems that dealers have had, distributors and manufacturers have had, is trying to determine what system will work where in the country. And we've had theoretical footprint maps and information that in often cases is probably not worth a whole lot. And it's a little project that's going on that Mike is handling the technical aspects and coordination of, that hopefully will put an end to a lot of these problems, and perhaps when this project is finished, the information will be available to everybody, and you'll be able to quite accurately predict what size and what type of system will work in what part of the country, even Hawaii. Mike, why don't you tell us a little bit about the rundown of what we're planning on that?
Well, a background for why this was of any interest is that when anybody wants to buy a satellite, let's suppose you have an extra $50 million for a satellite and you would like to buy one, one of the things that you'll have to do is to get a license from the FCC for that satellite. And in order to do that, one of the requirements is what they call a footprint chart. And you have to give that to the FCC, and they approve it. They're saying, oh yes, you're covering the CONUS coverage, or you're covering Alaska, or whatever it is you've required. Those are computer-generated charts. Those are not real life. It's what someone's taken the spacecraft antenna, and they've done an antenna plot, and they've said, oh yes, if we put this much power and this much path loss, so much power will arrive in Madison, Wisconsin. But it's their guess. And if they put it in orbit and the antenna slightly tilted, the footprint that reality now has to deal with is nowhere even close to the computerized footprint. So what we're going to do is we're going to take a truck and a 9-foot dish, and we're going to tour the country. And in selected spots, about 55 to it's growing, it's getting bigger, spots around the country, we're going to measure carrier noise ratio on all transponders on all satellites that are running video. And from that, a computer program I have will actually be able to generate footprint, real life, honest to God, no fudging footprint charts for all the satellites. So a dealer can get a hold of one of these charts. They'll be in 2 formats. For the esoteric person, he'll get them in EIRP DBW. For the other person, they'll be in antenna size. And he'll say, oop, I'm on the outside of this contour, and that means I've got to use an 8-foot dish to get this kind of performance. And that tour is starting at the end of this month. It will take about 90 to 120 days. And it's sort of like if you see this funny-looking truck with a big trailer behind it, and 2 forlorn people, one of which is Taylor's son, sitting on the side going, we've got a flat tire, help them, because they're doing something good for the industry. And they will tour the country doing CDN measurements, using a lot of all common equipment that any dealer could put together to make CDN measurements. And then the data reduction will take probably about a month, and then we'll have footprint charts.
I would like to point out, Mike, that although STV magazine is underwriting this trip and putting it all together, it's with a tremendous amount of assistance from other individuals and companies in the industry. I don't have enough time to tell you how many people have called in and how much assistance we've received, from corporate sponsorships to people saying, hey, if you're in Pocahontas, Arkansas, you got a place to stay for the night. It has really been tremendous, and I'm not going to try and read the list of names because I would snub somebody, but they will, of course, be published.
I think it's a very important thing to do. I've not been involved at the beginning, and I think that you guys would be congratulated for putting it together in this way. I know the type of antenna measurements that Mike does, and I do those independently, and Mike and I have always laughed. We get together and we play kind of a game of cards.
I'll show you yours, you show me.
And we always agree to each other within the measurement accuracies, and we now understand these measurement accuracies. It's important to understand that spacecraft manufacturers, this will be a mixed blessing to them.
Oh, geez.
They want to play a fairly closed game. They don't want to really tell what's exactly going on, because in many cases a spacecraft is such a complex thing that they don't know exactly what's happening or what's aging. And when you're done with this, you will have much more knowledge as individuals about, and all of us will, about what's going on with these spacecraft and their footprints than anybody in the history of man, including the spacecraft manufacturers, have had before.
Yes, it's never been done before. That's
No.
an interesting point.
Well, I'm certainly very, very excited about it, and the response, I couldn't possibly over-exaggerate. We've never been involved in anything that's generated this much response. And anybody out there, the itinerary and the dates and the tour will be published in various places. And if you'd like to have them stop by and see your dealership or drop into your neighborhood, give them a call, and they'll try and work it into their itinerary. It's meant to be a generic industry-wide promotion and data collection. Those are the prime requirements of the trip. So we'd like to get all of you involved, and please give us a call with your ideas and suggestions. It will be leaving May the 29th, and it probably, in actual fact, will run till late in September. The group will try to make the major trade shows and put in appearances there. We have another question.
Yeah, my name's John O'Neill again, and I've been trying to follow on the trades, I don't know, maybe big threat of the 12 gigahertz, and it's hard to find out whether USCI's had a success or a failure or whatever. It seems they've been pretty secretive. Is 12 gigahertz dead, dying, or just dormant, or?
It's got problems.
Taylor, go with it.
I'll go with that fairly quickly. If you read the Wall Street Journal, USCI has an immediate $45 million problem, and General Instruments shut off delivery of equipment to them. If you read the trade press in the last week, they laid off half of their sales force. There are quite a few problems. I'm involved in some 12 gigahertz planning with some other groups, and they are in a planning stage. They're in meetings trying to decide standards that are de facto standards in our industry already. The 12 gigahertz people have absolutely no idea what's going on in our industry, and they don't believe it when you tell them. I think it's, somebody likened it last night to the 8-track cassette versus cassette cartridge. I think that 4 gigahertz is going to grow for many years and become very, very strong. And eventually, in international planning and everything else we're doing, it will be 12 gigahertz. But for a much longer time than any of us think, it's 4. And each of us that's in that market now is going to be a pioneer in the 12 gigahertz market too. I see it as a natural growth thing, and you get into it now, you've got it for the future too.
Unfortunately, that just about leaves us out of time. Always seems to happen this way. We just get warmed up and the clock runs down. I hope you've enjoyed watching it as much as we've enjoyed doing it. It's been a very exciting show to us with some very interesting announcements from STTI, from Space, Dave Beeching from Oak Satellite. I certainly enjoyed the panel and the discussion, and I hope we can do it again. I'd like to thank everybody for their response to the last show. It was overwhelming. And we greatly appreciate it. We're professionals in the satellite industry, but we're not professionals as TV performers, so we do our best up here. We plan, with the good graces of everybody concerned, to continue doing this, and I think tentative arrangements are that there will be another show sometime in August. Thank you very much for watching Satellite Showtime 84, and until next time, goodbye.
A copy of this program or other Nova Video production shows may be obtained by writing or calling Nova Video Productions, Lone Rock, Wisconsin 53556, or phone 1-800-826-8285. If you have comments, questions, or suggestions regarding these shows, please send them in. Nova Video Productions has facilities to meet all of your video needs, including production of commercial messages. We wish to thank the following sponsors for making possible this program for and by the satellite industry: Chaparral Communications, KLM Electronics Incorporated, OnSat Publication, National Satellite Communications, Channel Guide Publication, Qualtronics Incorporated, Satellite Dealer Publication, Bowman Industries, and Coops Satellite Digest. No portion of this program may be reproduced for resale or other commercial purposes without the expressed written consent of Nova Video Productions.